Hello again. This is World News here on TVP World. I'm Anna Kalczyńska. After days of negotiating, Hungary finally threw its support behind the rollover of EU sanctions targeting Russian individuals and entities. According to diplomatic sources, a compromise had to be struck on the high-stakes 6-month deal, which was set to expire in the next 48 hours. We are now joined live by our EU correspondent, Elena Lasconi. Hello, Angela. What can you tell us about what occurred behind the scenes to get the measure extended once more?
Yes, so what we're hearing from our official sources here is that a significant amount of wrangling and negotiating needed to occur to convince Budapest to support the extension. Now, these sanctions target roughly 2,400 individuals. Most of them are Russian, and they have been targeted by frozen assets as well as visa travel bans due to their involvement in Russian President Vladimir Putin's ongoing invasion of Ukraine. Now, these sanctions require a 6-month extension, with that measure expected to expire on Saturday. The negotiations started on Wednesday. They wound up today, so it really represents how much negotiating needed to occur to ensure that Hungary didn't torpedo those discussions. But to convince that ambassador today, we're hearing that 7 names needed to be removed from that list. 3 were deceased, 4 were not. This is apparently the golden number to convince Budapest to support the matter. But this is not the first time Hungary has done this in terms of EU sanctions against Russia. Roughly a month ago, they threatened to block the rollover of extensions targeting Russian industries such as oil, gas, luxury goods and broadcasting media for the same reasons. And we've heard from Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban that he claims he doesn't want to endanger the Ukraine-Russia ceasefire negotiations. That is why he has not voted in support, or he votes up until the last minute, these sanctions. This is also allegedly why he didn't vote last week at the European Council in support of a measure that would have given Ukraine significant support on the battlefield in the form of a military initiative. But the rollover of EU sanctions targeting those individuals requires a final tick of approval at a Foreign Affairs Council on Monday, so we'll wait and see what comes out of that meeting.
Elena Lasconi from Brussels. Angela, thank you so much. Vladimir Putin questioned the US brokered proposal for a ceasefire, setting forth a set of conditions and demands, while agreeing with the proposal to cease hostilities. Putin reiterated claims that the current Ukrainian government is part of the underlying problem. Speaking during a joint press conference with Belarusian leader Alexander Lukashenko, Putin demanded several concessions from Ukraine, including that Kyiv stop mobilization and training of troops, and other nations stop supplying weapons to the war-torn country. At the same time, Putin called the US idea, quote, great and correct, adding that it still needed to be discussed. Additionally, during the conference, Vladimir Putin floated the idea of talking the deal over the phone. And now for more comment, we turn to our Ukraine correspondent, Oz Katerji. Good morning, Oz. So what can you tell us? What are the reactions in Kyiv to all that?
Well, Zelensky put out a very forceful comment on Thursday night, warning Donald Trump that the Russians were preparing to reject the offer and talking about these conditions that Russia wants to place on Ukraine in order to accept this proposal, with Zelensky reiterating that Ukraine has put forward no conditions for this proposal. I think the Ukrainians are worried that Putin is trying to manipulate Trump and trying to force Trump's hand into even stronger conditions being put on Ukraine. Now, these conditions that Putin is saying, that they have to stop training their troops, that weapons cannot arrive, these should be obvious non-starters for the Ukrainians. This 30-day ceasefire, while giving Ukrainians a break, will also allow the Ukrainians time to regroup. Putin does not want to allow the Ukrainians time to regroup. And the question is why? What happens after that 30-day ceasefire that Putin is so desperate to avoid the Ukrainians receiving military aid and recruiting soldiers and training their soldiers? So the Ukrainians are very distrustful of any rhetoric coming out of the Kremlin. and they don't think that Putin is serious about this ceasefire. And looking at the conditions that Putin has allegedly asked of Donald Trump, it seems they have a point in this, suggesting that the Russians are not coming at this with the full respect for the kind of treaty that Donald Trump wants to sign. Putin himself was talking about nuances, talking about being unsure how the ceasefire would affect military operations in the Kursk Oblast. It's very clear that Putin is trying to play a game here. That's the way the Ukrainians see it, at least. The question is now, how will the White House respond to this? Only one man in the world can answer that question. His name's Donald Trump. So the Ukrainians are going to be waiting with bated breath to hear how the US responds to these words coming from Putin, and whether or not they take Putin's words seriously on these ceasefire proposals, and whether they decide to try and impose these further conditions on the Ukrainians. So a lot more to come here. It's still unclear how the White House is going to move forward with this.
Oz Katerji from Kyiv. Thank you so much, Oz. So distrustful is a good word and an adequate adjective to characterize also the Ukrainian Foreign Ministry Andriy Sybiha comment on the ceasefire negotiations with Russia. According to Ukrainian official, Ukraine is seeking to end the conflict while Russia is aiming to prolong it.
Ukraine said yes to US ceasefire proposal because Ukraine wants peace. Putin, rather than saying yes, puts forward various conditions. Ukraine seeks an end to the war. Putin seeks to continue the war. The rest of the words are just a smokescreen.
Vladimir Putin wants some sort of control over Ukraine, which will ultimately mean the de-Ukrainization of Ukraine. That's according to TVP World's guest analyst Andreas Umlaut, who said, answering a question about the proposed Ukraine-Russia peace deal.
I don't even think that this sort of trampling of international law will be sufficient for Putin. He wants more, and he wants eventually some sort of control over Ukraine. He calls that denazification, which means de facto a de-Ukrainization, a de-sovereignization of Ukraine, and transforming Ukraine again into a Russian protectorate.
China is hosting a meeting with Russian and Iranian representatives on Friday to discuss the Iranian nuclear program, according to Chinese Foreign Ministry. Prior to the meeting, Chinese authorities expressed their hope that the talks would result in a renewed nuclear dialogue between the nations. Representatives present at the meeting are set to discuss other issues of mutual interest as well. This meeting comes as US President Donald Trump pushes a new nuclear deal with Tehran following his first administration's exit from an international agreement regarding the issue back in 2018. In recent months, European leaders have held a round of talks with Iranian authorities regarding Iran's nuclear program.
As a permanent member of the United Nations Security Council and participant of the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, China has long called for resolving the Iranian nuclear issue through political and diplomatic means, upholding the international nuclear non-proliferation system and promoting peace and stability in the Middle East. The Beijing meeting represents China's latest diplomatic efforts aimed at strengthening communication and coordination and creating conditions for the early resumption of dialogue and negotiations. In the current situation, we believe that all parties should exercise common restraint to prevent the Iranian nuclear issue from escalating or even shifting towards confrontation. China sincerely hopes all parties will work together in the same direction, continuously build trust and dispel doubts, and turn the momentum for restarting dialogue and negotiations into a reality as soon as possible.
U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance has responded to the Polish president's proposal of redeploying American nuclear warheads to Poland. As stated by Vance in an interview for American TV channel Fox News, he would be shocked if Donald Trump agreed to Andrzej Duda's idea. Vance said he has not discussed the matter with Trump. However, he doesn't think the U.S. president would agree to it. Vance was asked about a recent interview Andrzej Duda gave to the British Financial Times, where he called on Washington to redeploy nuclear weapons to Poland. As stated by the Polish president, It would make for a nuclear deterrent against aggression from Russia. Furthermore, Andrzej Duda noted that as the border of NATO changed in 1999, so should its weapon deployment plans. Not everyone in Poland, however, is on the same page, as yesterday Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk criticized Duda, saying such matters should be discussed quietly and not in front of the world press. Polish President Andrzej Duda's idea of the United States deploying some of its nuclear arsenal in Poland drew comments from all over Europe. However, it is not Warsaw's first time suggesting Washington based its nuclear weapons in the country. According to our guest from Globsec, Tomasz Nagy, the proposal is consistent with Poland's ambitions of doing more nuclear deterrence.
This is not the first time that Poland has been vocally advocating for an increased role in NATO's nuclear sharing, and it's probably by slight margin probably the most ambitious exclamation of Polish ambition to do more nuclear deterrence. But this is consistent with what we have been hearing from Poland, both publicly and behind closed doors. And it's also reflective of the security situation in Europe, because one of the direct implications of the war of Russia against Ukraine is that nuclear weapons matter, and nuclear deterrence is an integral part of the overall deterrence picture. And Poland wants to have a pretty sizable role within that overall deterrence picture.
With this comment, we conclude this edition of World News, but please stay tuned to TVP World for more continuous update. Thank you very much for watching, and see you soon.